Lunch programs, the partial compensation of schools towards low socioeconomic students. This research project was completed for a sociology class and focuses on examining how schools compensate for lower class individuals. For low socioeconomic students, they may not have access to nutritious foods outside of the school environment due to external limitations they might face. This research project attempts to examine the partial compensatory role schools play to limit the likelihood of increasing inequality that is present in the school environment. I will specifically be discussing how children in low socioeconomic status households tend to do poorly in academic settings compared to their middle socioeconomic status peers due to a deficiency of proper nutrition and access to healthy food. First, I will begin with defining my terms that I will be using throughout this presentation. Socioeconomic status, or simply SES, refers to the hierarchy of social class. It is measured by various factors, including education, income, and occupation. Compensatory mechanisms are the ability of an institution to compensate for disparities within a given environment. For purposes of my research project, I will be looking at how compensatory mechanisms play a role in schools. Seasonal comparisons are the changes to inequality relative to the time in the academic year. Frequency criteria are the number of times certain food groups or items had to occur in order to remain within the French nutritional guidelines. And for purposes of this research project, I have defined self-efficacy as the ability to present non-disruptive behavior in the school and classroom environment. Now that I have explained my terms used, I think we can all agree that no one should have to experience the difficulties the lower class possess, especially young students. One avenue that can be taken to provide remedial efforts is the implementation of lunch programs in schools. Implementing school lunch programs benefits all students, particularly those in the lower class. According to Wang and Fauzi, when students are attending class hungry, it greatly reduces their ability to learn, thrive, and explore their full potential. If lunch programs are implemented, this benefits the lower class as they have access to a nutritious meal, which will aid in better academic achievement, and they will display less disruptive behaviors in the classroom environment. I used two of Downey and Condren's theories to help explain my project. I use compensation theory as my primary theory, and I use their research on seasonal comparisons as a secondary resource. First, we need to examine the research done on seasonal comparisons to better understand the nuances of compensatory mechanisms. Seasonal comparisons, or simply learning loss, is defined by Downey and Condren as the comparisons made regarding inequality which will change relative to the time in the academic year. The data suggests there is no significant gap in learning when school is active. However, in the summer months, when school is inactive, there are greater disparities present, and this is especially prevalent among low SES students. Therefore, schools will act as a compensatory mechanism during the school year because they can provide lunch programs for low SES students. However, once summer vacation begins, there is a significant loss in food quality. This is primarily due to the lack of compensation schools provide once the school year is completed. Additionally, the inequalities present in low SES households and their environments decrease the accessibility to nutritious foods, Therefore, schools can only act as partial compensators. The following 3 sections will outline the effects lunch programs have on low SES students. I have chosen to compare measures taken between France and Canada. Section 1. Nutrition. I chose France due to the number of frequency criteria which must be fulfilled. As a reminder, frequency criteria is defined as the number of times certain food groups or items had to occur to remain within the French nutritional guidelines. According to View et al., these are specific requirements that must be met and maintained to remain in good standing with the GEMRCN, a public catering, nutrition, and market study group. The frequency criteria enable schools to offer balanced meals for students. This is beneficial not only for the nutritional benefits, but also ensures children of low SES have access to healthy and balanced foods, which they may not otherwise due to the nature of their economic status. In comparison, Canada currently does not have a nationwide food program in place. Canada is one of few Western countries that does not offer a comprehensive, publicly subsidized national meal program that are available to students. However, while there is no federal consensus on school lunch programs, they are implemented in nearly every province, dependent on the region. Overall, the implementation of food programs show promising outcomes for children, primarily when we consider their academic achievement. Section 2. Academic Achievement. According to Fott et al., studies have shown that food insecurity in childhood is associated with detrimental impacts on healthy development. Thus, academic success in childhood may be negatively affected, allowing both poverty and food insecurity to persist into subsequent generations. The data suggests the lower the food insecurity the individual is experiencing, the lower their academic achievement will be. Additionally, truancy rates go up with children who come from low SES backgrounds. Research done by Tamiru and Belachu indicate that students from food-secure households were 57% less likely to be absent from school versus their food-insecure peers. Absenteeism also demonstrates significant barriers for students as they will score lower on exams, have lower overall grades, and have low cognitive development. Further, inaccessibility to nutritious meals can provoke disruptive behavior among students in the classroom environment. Section 3. Self-Efficacy. Being in a state of food insecurity presents many issues because the children who are from low-income households will not have access to healthy and nutritious foods. This is problematic in the classroom as children need proper nutrition to fuel their learning. Therefore, if a child goes to school hungry, they are more likely to be distracted and not learning compared to their peers who come from food-secure households. The data I had found in my research suggests there will be higher academic results if a student is alert and listening, rather than distracted by hunger pangs. This is clear through lower academic success and lower mental well-being of the individual. As stated by Godrich et al., there is a relationship between positive self-efficacy and mental well-being. Therefore, strategies must be implemented to ensure the lasting trajectory of the food insecure and to mitigate the negative psychological outcomes during childhood. When comparing food programs between countries, for example, between France and Canada, there is a drastic difference in the quality of lunch programs offered. France has distinct frequency criteria that must be maintained, and all schools in France must adhere to these rules. Conversely, Canada is one of the only developed countries that do not have a nationwide food program offered in schools. The compensation thesis comes back into play because of the schools which attempt to compensate for this inequality by offering food programs. These food programs are beneficial to help close the gap between low and high SES students. However, schools are only able to partially compensate for these inequalities because they cannot account for disparities that occur outside of the school environment. For example, schools will not be able to account for inequalities present outside the school environment, such as living environment, neighborhood, or job security of the children's guardians. Since these are all potential factors that can affect the livelihood of students outside school, schools can only do so much to alleviate external stressors. Currently, there is a lack of a national food program in Canada, which proves problematic as the research shows school-provided lunch programs are beneficial for students, regardless of their socioeconomic status. To provide remedial efforts, perhaps a policy change may be in order on a federal level. With the information I presented earlier, what can we learn from the French model? Well, the French model abides by certain frequency criteria that ensure balanced meals are given to students. These criteria are moderated by the GEM-RCN, which is a public catering and nutrition study group. Having the ability to access healthy foods address social class gaps, especially in learning, because healthy food provides fuel. Eating the correct foods will benefit students and their learning because they will have adequate nutrition, they will be able to perform better academically, and the risks of presenting disruptive behavior in the classroom are less likely to occur. Food programs are a beneficial service for all students. Further, this topic can be used for future research, especially pertaining to COVID recovery, as the pandemic has been difficult on everyone, but especially those in the lower class. Thank you all for listening to my presentation, and I now welcome any questions that anyone may have.